I'm a professor at Cal State University Fullerton, and I recently, well, actually now not recent anymore. I got tenure now over a year ago. So my journey,
Congratulations on that,
thank
by the
you.
way.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh, it was it was tough, but I got it. So I'm a tenured professor of sexual communication and relational communication. It's a mouthful, but really the essence of it is I study communicative interactions within the sexual and relationship realm. And it's very important, as you know, my research would also agree with, and plenty of research would agree with, that communication is the most important thing in a relationship and in a sexual interaction. So that's my first bucket. Is my first hat is I'm a professor. Now, I'm also a coach. So I have a private practice here in Los Angeles, and I coach people in sexual communication and help them set relationship goals and give them different steps to get to their goals. So slightly different from being like a therapist, a little bit more goal driven and mission driven. And then my third hat is I'm a social media sex educator. I have a very thriving TikTok community of 1.7 million followers, members, and that's called Love Bites. And that's kind of like my social media presence. I have my podcast, Love Bites by Dr. Tara podcast. Every week I interview an expert by educational practice on a certain sex topic. So it's very exciting. I have that long form content for my podcast. I have short form content on my TikTok and Instagram, and it's thriving.
Oh, first of all, I'm just blown away by you. Congratulations on your success on getting tenured. That's
Thank
incredible,
you.
especially, you know, I don't know your exact age, but you're younger. And like typically tenure happens a little bit further
34.
along. I mean,
34.
congratulations,
Thank you so much.
rock
Thank you.
star. Yeah,
Oh,
you're a rock
that's
star.
that means a lot. It was hard work.
Absolutely. I know it is. Yeah. And then also, anytime you have a successful social media account, I mean, I think people are learning how hard that is, but that's also extremely hard work because it's constant engagement, constant attention, or it dies very fast.
Right.
And so to say that you've been able to provide enough value, that 1.7 million people, I think you said, are following you, that says a lot. I'm really excited about the things you've already brought up. And I want to talk to you about something you mentioned earlier, which is that communication is the number one ingredient for success, it sounds like, for true intimacy or any type of sexual connection. And as you know, coming from the perspective of Live Jasmine, it's all just communication because there's no actual physical touching between model and member. Is that one of the reasons this industry of camming and like sexual content is so successful? Is it because it's so much just of the communication back and forth and not even the physical aspect? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, so first off, research found that generally a lot of people are lonely and they want connection, some type of connection. And because we had this pandemic for quite a few years, and even, I mean, even now, some people are still very careful and staying home. I think this online interaction becomes something that is super viable and to a lot of people almost like needed in order to fulfill that intimacy desire in their life. If they don't have a partner, it's very difficult to inquire for intimacy elsewhere, especially for the past couple of years. So I think this becomes, like almost like a necessity business for a lot of people that require, intimacy in that sense. And there's actually this past year in May, I was at the International Communication Association conference giving a speech for my new research. But the person before me actually gave a presentation about like camming and like that parasocial interaction. So I believe their research found this parasocial interaction is very beneficial for users. And there are various like markers that they did in a survey. So like one of them was like sense of closeness, one of them was like life satisfaction, one of them was like less loneliness, less stress, things like that. And in general, the research found that the use of cam interacting with like a cam person has really been beneficial for the users. And that was actually one of the few times I've seen very legitimate empirical research on the cam industry.
It's interesting because I think you're right. There's not a ton of research on this topic. And, in general, as we know, and I'm sure you know even better than I do, things pertaining to sexuality are still very taboo, and people just
So taboo.
don't want to go there. They don't want to talk about it, which still, it just blows my mind because it's just such a building block of who we are as human beings, our sexuality, our intimacy, our connection. But the Kinsey Institute, we talked about one of your friends there, Justin LeMiller. They have done studies on Live Jasmine, and what their research showed is actually the models that were making substantially more money per private or per call were not even really discussing anything explicit. So members were spending longer times on calls that weren't even necessarily completely just explicit. There may have been like sexuality to some degree, but for the most part, it was intimate in a different way. It was a sharing of what's happening in that person's life or whatever the case is. So back to your point of communication just needed in our interactions with intimacy, that was demonstrated in some of the studies that the Kinsey Institute did.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, parasocial relationship is still a relationship. And just to define for the listeners, parasocial relationship is a relationship that a user established with someone who is completely online and they don't know like in person in real life. And research have found parasocial relationship to be effective ever since it was like television. Some people will watch television, watch like a certain series, and they've been following it for like 3 seasons, and they feel like there is like connection and friendship with a character. So I can imagine how effective, interacting with cam person can be in terms of establishing parasocial relationship and making it an effective thing for you as a user. It's kind of like therapy.
Yes, and that's something that a lot of the models have said. I've been interviewing our models, our members, human connection experts, sexologists, and the one thing that comes up quite a bit is that the models feel like they are therapists sometimes because they are listening. That's actually, I think the thing that models do the most is listen, the successful ones, really, But to your point about this parasocial relationship that we develop, I'm thinking about the show Friends and like how, I don't know, it's like we knew those characters. We love those characters. They came back and did a reunion 20 years later and we all watched it. We still buy their merch. When they write a book, we read it. It shows like how deeply we felt connected or relatable those characters were.
Oh, yeah.
I think there is something too where like I've noticed in my own life as the digital age has grown, my relationships where I can just send them a voice note really fast and they can tell me their thoughts back. Or if something comes up in the middle of the day, I can just send them a text message and they send comfort back or whatever the case is. That's very valuable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's extremely valuable. Actually, earlier this year, I published new research that show for college students receiving encouraging texts from their friends and their family can reduce level of stress and depression and prevent depression. So, I mean, receiving communication via technology from people has like, just so much value. And I think technology has been receiving like bad names, when perhaps like older generation goes like, oh, all these kids are on their phones or on their iPad or on their laptop. I mean, there are explicit pros to technology that we have never been able to afford otherwise in the past, to people's like mental health and like physical health. So I think we can't discount the fact that like these technologies and platforms, like being able to talk to the models, like this actually can be very, very good for some people.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering how you mentioned in the research you found that a college student receiving a message could lower depression and anxiety. Is it still applicable if, let's say, just using this lens of camming, if a member who, because I've interviewed members who have disabilities and they can't leave their homes, and so live jasmine, it's not just a sexual thing for them, it's like social and interaction, and these members actually get to know the other members that are in the models rooms, and then they kind of become friends. It's like they're kind of part of her fan club, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like when you really love, I don't know, Star Wars, and then you go to
right.
those, you know what I mean? You kind of
Yeah.
bond with other people. So I've noticed that these members bond with each other when they have like a sincere love for a certain model.
Mhm.
So they're getting community and connection in that way. But I'm wondering if you think it's also applicable if a member receives a message from a model that just says, "Hey, thinking of you." Is that going to do the same thing as what your research showed that a college student might receive from a family member?
I think the implication is similar because if there was like some type of established relationship, fondness, positive feelings towards this person, receiving any type of communication from them will like help release feel good hormones, in
Right.
which is a good buffer for stress and ultimately depression. I can't say there is specific, causal relationship between speaking with like a cam girl and then like reducing depression, but the implications would say that it has a lot of mental health benefits to receive interaction from people that you really enjoy and you have like that you have fondness and likeness too.
What is like the most interesting piece of research that you have found or come across?
That sexual communication, out of all, like I had a lot of different predictor variables in this study, but sexual communication is the number one predictor of sexual satisfaction in the long run.
Wow. Okay, break
Yeah.
that down for me. So does that mean like sexting? Does that mean like talking during foreplay? What is that?
Yeah, I love this question because people think sexual communication is such a vague term.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's true. But it's all of that combined. So it's, the ability to dirty talk. It's, communicating pleasure and displeasure and giving guidance to the partner during sex. It's communicating consent early on and initiating sex effectively. It's having pillow talk afterwards and, self like partner care afterwards. It's also macro, like talking about what kind of sex we like and what do we expect in long-term sexual wellness for both of us in a relationship. um, do you have any kinks? What are your desires in terms of frequency? Right. So it's like both micro, like interactional things during sex, but also macro, like about sex. So that's all like sexual communication. It's both micro and macro. And you should be doing both in order to, achieve or experience sexual satisfaction in a long run. The sad part is a lot of people don't feel equipped to have that kind of communication during sex or that kind of communication about sex because of our culture. And for the longest time, talking about sex is super taboo, right? I mean, people don't just, share like, oh, my husband has ED for the last 3 years and we haven't had sex. Like, you'd never hear that because it's so taboo. But now I'm seeing a lot of efforts with sex educators, sexologists around the world, encouraging people, giving them tools like how to say it. Here are examples. You can say exactly the same thing in your relationship, me included. So I hope that with this organized efforts around the world, we are encouraging more people to talk about sex in order to have a better sex life.
Wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for those listening that don't know, that means erectile dysfunction,
Right.
right? Yeah. Yeah, and I think to your point, that also causes us to feel even more isolated, which I think we can all agree is clearly the most painful thing for a human being. I mean, that's why when you're taking punishment, if you've committed a crime, you're in jail, you're isolated
Yeah.
from the rest of the group because it is punishment for us. And so if let's use your example of a wife who hasn't been able to have sex with her husband in 3 years, okay, because he has ED. Now she probably doesn't feel comfortable talking about that with anyone except a doctor, maybe, or
Right.
maybe one close girlfriend, who knows,
Right.
And that's because we have made it so uncomfortable and taboo to mention anything sexual.
Exactly. And I mean, that's just terrible for both the wife and the husband, because I'm pretty sure the husband feels really shitty about the
Right.
situation and really feel like, he doesn't have anyone to go to. He probably doesn't have like a male friend to talk about, or, if sex coaching and sex therapy isn't something accessible for them, they might feel really trapped, not being able to disclose this issue and find a solution together. Um, one thing that I have thought of about people experiencing sex issues and them not telling other people in order to find a solution, or talk to each other to collaborate to find a solution. One of the reasons why people don't do that is because we are so attached to our sexual identity, and men are so attached to their penis as their sexual identity. So if their penis doesn't work, it becomes like, oh, my masculinity is now being questioned, right? When in fact, the fact is 1 in 3 men have experienced ED at some point in their lives. So literally so many, like, billions of men have experienced ED at some point in their lives. So therefore, really nothing to be ashamed about, and really just something that happens peripherally and can definitely be talked about to find a solution. If you see it objective like that and finding a solution together with your wife or partner, then it's not such a big issue. But because our identities are so attached to our sexuality, it becomes like almost a shameful thing to mention, to even like bring up, right? And I think, with like cam sessions, I bet a lot of people are allowed to just share their feelings and emotions and desires to try certain things without the type of shame that they would usually feel face to face with a partner or a date.
Absolutely. That's something that models and members have shared with me. And I find it really interesting because the models don't know the day-to-day life of the member or anyone in their day-to-day life, members feel more comfortable sharing more of themselves because it's like, this isn't going to get back to anyone I know. So what I've discovered is that members will kind of go to these taboo fantasies that they may have or may just want to try and realize, oh yeah, I didn't like that. I'm not going to do that again. Or
Right.
I actually am really into that. That's something that's like part of who I am. And so now they're able to learn about themselves
Yeah.
and kind of go from there. And the models too. I've had models tell me that because she was acting out a certain fantasy or talking about a certain fantasy with a member, she realized like, wow, I really like that. I never thought I would. and she can explore that more. It's helped her learn about herself now.
Wow,
Uh,
interesting. So it is
yeah.
not just for pleasure, but also a platform for exploration.
100% exploration. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that almost everyone I've talked to, both model and member, has said to me, is that they learn more about themselves through the service because they
Wow.
didn't realize, because they felt safe enough to kind of go there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They
It's
went there.
the
Yeah,
it's the stranger on the plane phenomenon,
totally.
where you don't
Totally.
know the person, so you just like throw up words. You vocalize everything because there's nothing to lose.
There's no social repercussions for it,
Right,
you know?
exactly.
So like some members are like, well, like I'm scared if I tell my wife that I want to
Right.
try this, she will be disgusted with me, or she'll leave me, or she won't understand, or I may hurt her feelings, or whatever the case is, they have fears around social repercussions of
Right.
exploring this part of themselves.
Mm.
So on the platform with Live Jasmine, there are no social repercussions. You know what I mean?
Wow. I bet most people haven't thought about it that way. I have to admit, I usually think about camming as like a, space for pleasure. And of course it is pleasure, but never thought about how it could be so like enlightening for exploration, because you can vocalize certain things that you don't feel comfortable telling other people in your life otherwise.
Absolutely. And you can see, oh, like, did I like that? Did I not? Or you just learn more about yourself. Do I need to explore this more? Or do I need to never do this again? Or,
Wow.
whatever
Have
the
you
case
guys
is.
done research on this topic?
I know the Kinsey Institute is doing a lot of
Cool.
research, but I don't know like the specifics of what exactly they're looking at.
Now,
So
my question for you would be, it's a little a tough question, but my question for you would be, do you think that it takes away from interpersonal interactions?
you mean like, let's say the husband who has a fantasy he doesn't want to share with his wife, so he shares it with the cam
And
model.
they, right, yeah.
Okay, my personal opinion is that ultimately no. And let me explain why.
Mhm.
Because I've talked to the members, and what they've shared with me is they basically they gained a level, many of them gained a level of confidence in some of these areas. So let's say that a member acts out a fantasy he had with a model, and he realizes he really likes it. He realizes, wow, she had a positive response to it, you know? So
Yeah.
now the member has told me, oh, well, I felt comfortable to try it on a date, or
Mm.
I felt comfortable enough to share it because it had been already kind of experimented with and played out. And that member was secure in whether he liked it or didn't like it or whatever. But I think ultimately for members, it's definitely given them in many ways um, more confidence around certain
Yeah.
things, which gives them a little bit of a boost to play these things out or share these things in their day-to-day life. Now, are there cases where maybe someone just wants to act it out on the site and isn't giving here? I'm sure there are,
Mhm.
but from like my interviews I've done with members, it seems like they've taken that experience and helped make themselves like stronger and more confident. Yeah.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting to think that, the hypothesis would be acting out like your fantasies on cam can help increase your sexual confidence. Like that's research that Kinsey should be doing in their surveys and interviews. That would be so interesting to see if that's the case with showing empirical evidence and statistical significance on that. I can see how that would work.
And I think even beyond that, I've interviewed some really shy members, and what they shared, like I've interviewed members who have told me that because they had like the positive experience from a beautiful woman,
Mhm.
it just made them feel more confident at work. It made them feel more
Wow.
confident in general. Like I've had members tell me, like, if I hadn't grown the confidence I have in the last 2 years on the site, I wouldn't be even giving you this interview. like just talking in front of the camera is something that's would have been more of a challenge for them. And so yeah, for members, think about it. Men, they love women. You know what I mean? Like they love in general, we're speaking generally right now, but men are deeply affected by women. The Taj Mahal was built for a woman. You know what I mean? Like, so
people have went to war for women.
Yeah, yeah, they go to war for women. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? So think about it, men that are so deeply craving this validation that we as women are able to give them, and they're able to receive it from this woman who most of them see as like in the parasocial sense. So there's almost like this heightened perfection of this woman in their eyes.
Mhm.
And that woman who's like almost perfect is giving them attention and love. So
Mhm.
it's like validating something in their self-esteem, I think. And then they feel more confident, and that carries over into their work from what they've shared with me into their dating life. Like there was one guy who told me that he would have never approached a woman at the bar. And now, because he's had these really pleasant experiences flirting with models, he feels confident to go and approach women.
Well, you're speaking my language, because the research that I just presented in May in Paris that I was talking about earlier, based on 5,000 individuals, I found that sexual self-esteem predicts higher sexual confidence. So if this type of interaction help increasing their self-esteem, for sure it will turn into higher confidence like outside of the bedroom. So that's really interesting.
I want to ask you, you've said now a few times that sexual communication is, it sounds like more important. It's like the foundation for everything else when it comes to intimacy. And as we discussed, on a site like Live Jasmine, there is only sexual communication. I mean, you can show
Yeah.
something on the camera, but you're
All of that is
not
communication,
physically.
is nonverbal communication.
Exactly. There's never physical touch. So my question to you would be through your lens. So let's say there's a really strong intimate relationship between model and member on Live Jasmine. They're doing all the intimate communication. And obviously there's just some type of friendship that it just always develops, versus someone who has a one night stand, but it's physical, like they're in person. Which one is, I don't want to say uh, not healthier, but which one would be more impactful in a positive way?
Well, I would have to say the first one, because at the end of the day, communication and positive interactions with people uh always have a positive impact on the person receiving that communication. So I would say, nothing bad with one night stands. I have had my fair share that were, fun, and it serves its purpose. But at the same time, if you're kind of comparing benefits, and if we're just looking at, a one night stand that's kind of mindless and drunken, night, and people weren't being mindful, versus an a parasocial relationship that has true like fondness and connection and closeness and trust, then I would have to say that communication is of better quality.
So, because I know as humans, we're extremely social.
Mm-hmm.
So, what you're saying is actually the communication and the camaraderie almost aspect is
Yeah,
more,
morale.
it's psychologically better for us than the actual physical touch.
I would say I mean, there isn't any research on this. I would say it depends on your love language too.
Oh, yeah.
Because if your love language, if your main way of receiving affection was touch, then perhaps, you need the touch. But to a lot of people, communication is what they crave. Really, communication, focus, attention, affection from the other person. Affectionate communication is a huge part of like life satisfaction. So I would say for a lot of people, that interaction is more beneficial than mindless, like one night stand and physical touch.
Fascinating. Now,
Yeah, one of my professors in the PhD program. He is the creator of this theory called affection exchange theory. And I highly recommend you look into it, maybe even interview him, because a lot of what, the camming industry is doing is affectionate exchange. And in his theory, he found that this affectionate communication, it has lots of personal benefits to both people. And, there's some research that show affectionate communication in real life, but also like through computer mediated communication, like camming and, FaceTime, things like that. So the fact that the user is exchanging affectionate messages, communication, verbal and nonverbal, with the models, they are receiving benefits. That's for sure based on this theory. So I think that it's not a stretch to say for a lot of people, and especially the users, they are receiving, psychological, emotional, mental health benefits.
Can we unpack some of those? Like, what are some examples of maybe each that someone could be receiving?
So, I mean, first off, affectionate communication is both verbal and nonverbal. And it's kind of subjective. So it's anything that the receiver deems like affectionate, right? Some people find, flirting affectionate. Yeah. Some people find explicit sexual verbal communication affectionate. Some people find just listening to me is affectionate. So it's, again, subjective. But if the receiver finds the exchanges is affectionate, then the benefits they would get actually, some of his research found that it helps with, number one, like physical health. It helps like regulate heart rates and like things like that. And then of course it helps reduce stress. And yeah, it helps like release, feel good hormones that will enhance the person's physical health, but also mental health. In terms of psychological and emotional health, you can see loneliness. Loneliness kills. And actually my professor, Dr. Corey Floyd, the same professor, actually wrote a book called The Loneliness Cure. And really, affectionate exchanges are the loneliness cure. The fact that the users are able to feel less lonely, it's already like the greatest benefit that you can get.
It's interesting. I'm currently reading this book called You Were Not Born to Suffer. Someone recommended it, and
I agree.
Yeah, right. I was like, wait, that's so true. Let me read that book. But no, it's basically a book but he combines science. I think he was kind of like a monk for several years. He really meditated for many years, but he also, I think, was a professor at some point. So he's got it all. But he combined and explained scientifically how when we are not loving or receiving love psychologically, and we're constantly upset, and when we're constantly not feeling good mentally, we are turning on our stress response and our stress hormones. And he breaks down how that basically stops your blood from flowing properly. And he's like, this is what will lead to some type of physical ailment. And this is one of the number one causes of physical ailments, is us simply being upset about something mentally. It starts there. And then we start ourselves through our thoughts, turning on all of our stress responses. And we prevent ourselves from physiologically flowing in a healthy way.
Oh, 100%. I mean, stress is the number one killer, because stress causes a lot of physical issues, right? And then your physical health become of question. So to me, if, sexual interaction helps reduce stress, which I think for most people it does, then why not engage in it more often? Right? When I hear people that said, oh, my husband and I have not had sex for a year, I go, wow, I don't know how you do it. I
Yeah,
really
really.
don't. You know, if there was one week that I didn't have sex, I would feel like a little bit tired. And, you know, because having sex gives me energy, like it's good energy. And also,
Yeah.
you get to release like stuck energy in your body. If we're talking a little bit metaphysical,
Yeah,
you
please.
know, in which a lot of, you know, gurus and coaches, in which I am like scientifically trained, but I also love listening to like metaphysical stuff and energy stuff, right? And from what I've learned in terms of energy is every time you have a good like sexual exchange, um, and this could be extended to mediated exchanges like through a computer, it releases stuck energy in your body, like stuck negative energy in your body, and it floods your body with like positive energy. And of course, there's no like empirical research on this, but it goes by like your belief, right? And I believe in it because I observe myself.
Mhm.
And I'm a pretty tedious observer. So, like, for the last, you know, 2 years, like, let's say, I think with my partner, I notice when if there was like a week where we're away from each other, or he's really busy or I'm really busy, and if we haven't had sex for, I don't even think there was a time we haven't had sex for a week, let's say 5 days. I feel a lot of like, I feel sluggish. Do you feel that? Do you feel like that? I'm
Yeah,
like, I
yeah.
always wonder if it's me, but every time I'm in some kind of women's circle, I ask other people and they feel the same way.
No, there's absolutely something to that because I think, well, there's a few things I want to say, but it's like you said, if we want to talk a little bit on the spiritual side,
Yeah.
an orgasm is like, I mean, monks go into caves and meditate for centuries to reach samadhi, which is just like this bliss state. And orgasms, I feel like, are like the highest kind of bliss that we can feel. It's short, you know what I mean? But it's still just this feeling of bliss and like connectedness and just this surge of power.
Oh, it's amazing.
And like you said, it moves energy. And then there's also the other side of it. If you have had a sexual encounter with someone where there's that fondness and connection, that other side is that you're getting all those other like fundamental benefits too, of connection, of intimacy, of love,
Yeah.
So then it's like all of that at once is incredible. And I want to say, like, look at you. You look revitalized. You look fresh. You look happy, and this is what a woman who is sexually fulfilled looks like. I feel like you can see a woman who's not. You know what I mean? You can look at her and you're like, yeah, she's not dry, but like there's not as much
Yeah.
life. There's not as much life in them.
Right. I understand exactly what you're saying because
Yeah.
I was that woman once. And I was in a relationship where it wasn't right for me. And I compromised like my desires for a long time. And I would say that during that time, I felt like I looked like that. You know, I look in the mirror and I feel like I look tired. I look unfulfilled. I look, like you said, like a little bit dry, you
Yeah.
know. And for the last few years that I've been with my current partner, and I've improved significantly my sexual communication, I noticed that not only that I feel amazing, that I look amazing, and I look in the mirror and I, you know, feel like I'm proud of the way I feel and look. Lots of people have told me, why the hell are you so happy?
Yeah.
And, you know, any close friends will know this is not fake because I'm like this all the time. And I would have to say that a big part of it is being sexually fulfilled.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really is. And people say bullshit. I mean, I can't prove to you otherwise. You know, like I had 2 orgasms this morning and I'm talking to you and I'm really happy talking about this. And my skin is glowing, my
Yes.
lips are glowing. I don't know.
Yes.
Like I feel great and I can't lie. It's one of the main contributors to me feeling great like every day.
Absolutely. And it shines through you. I mean, you're literally glowing. You know what I mean? Like, so we know you're telling the truth. I can see it on you. Okay. Like
Thank you.
you
Thank you.
can't hide this from me. Yeah, I can see
I
it.
appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just this whole conversation brings me to a thought where I'm like, hey, if someone, like, you're a good example, right? Like, you just told us a story. You were in a really unfulfilling relationship and you were looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, wow, I look tired. I look dry. We all have those moments, you know? But now you're fulfilled. You said that you are communicating more in a sexual way. And as we've discussed, we know there is scientific proof that that is psychologically very healthy and beneficial. So what I see is like, you know, if you don't eat for a while, you look starved, right? Right? You look too thin. But
Right.
then when you eat, you look healthy again.
Right.
So we can look at a woman and say, yeah, we can look at a woman, and we've seen it where we can tell she's unfulfilled in love. You can see it on her. But then when she's fulfilled again, you can see that on her. So that tells me that our sexuality, sexual communication, it is a foundational need for a human being in order to be healthy, right? Why
100.
aren't we teaching that in school? Why aren't we telling kids like healthy? And you know, if we taught it in a healthy way, we can put the boundaries and parameters like, hey, and also if you just
Yeah.
leak all your sexual energy and you don't have any reverence for it, that can also make you look dry and drained, you know, but in a healthy setting, it's foundational.
It's foundational, and you're speaking my language. I have always said that we should teach sexual communication in middle school.
Yeah.
And people think it's controversial. I don't think so. Kids watch porn at the age of 12. And you rather them learning from, you know, random videos. And there are some, you know, there are healthy porn that help you explore and this and that, but there's also some really crazy shit. So would you like to gamble and do that, or have a professional teach, you know, young adults how to communicate effectively and choose to have sex and engage in sexual communication when you want to? Like, why not teach that in junior high and teach these kids to have their own agency to engage in what they want? People think teaching kids sexual communication means they will have sex earlier. In fact, research found with comprehensive sex education, kids have sex later. Yeah. And of course, this research is not published it is published in an academic journal, but it's not picked up by like mainstream media because, again, you know, there's other reasons.
Right.
But now, like, now that we know, there's research, there's proof that people who learn comprehensive sex education, how to communicate in a relationship, how to initiate sex health in a healthy way, have sex later and have more fulfilling sex. Why not implement it early? I mean, we both know why, but yeah, that's why I feel like I feel blessed and I feel lucky that I am a college professor teaching sexual communication. And yeah, like every semester I get to teach, you know, two big groups of people, and they go out in the world and be agents of change. Like, they will be the person in their friend group, in their family, that will talk about effective sexual communication. And I find that so, so rewarding.
Oh, that's beautiful. Absolutely. And, you know, I was just, you know, thinking about why is it that when we don't really give kids the proper information at a younger age, why are they going out and having sex earlier? And part of me thinks it's because they're so curious. They don't know anything about it. But they know it's a fundamental drive. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
if we were to explain to them, hey, you know how you need food and water and shelter? You get all that. You also have this need for human connection and human intimacy and sexuality. And here's the right way to use that and to get that in a healthy, loving way that makes you feel good and makes someone else feel good. And then they're like, okay, they understand there's not this need
Right.
to like figure it out on their own, which, as we
Yeah.
know, can lead to a bunch of unwanted things that we see: teen pregnancy, an increase in STDs and STIs, and just
Research
not being.
actually found that areas that they teach abstinence-based sex education have the highest rate of teen pregnancy.
Well, there you go.
It's very telling.
It's very telling. Exactly. Fascinating. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this has been a great conversation. Actually, I just want to, like I sent in that email, you know, I send questions to kind of give the direction, but I really go based off of your
Yeah.
story. And so I'm going to peek and see, but I really like how our interview turned out.
Yeah,
I
this
am.
is an amazing chat. I love it. You're so good.
Oh, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
you're a good host.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I actually wanted to ask you because as you know, you are a pretty much a sex and love coach, it sounds like. You're a professor. You have your PhD. You are also a sexual content creator. You mentioned TikTok. You have a huge following there. I am curious, how have you been able to sustain your presence on TikTok or social media with the insane censorship? How have you done that?
Yeah, so I've honestly the early on, which was like earlier this year, I started putting out content on TikTok and I remember getting banned a lot and I kept doing the appeal part,
Oh,
you know,
good.
because you can appeal. Yeah, and I kept appeal. And there was one time I wrote like a big paragraph about, you know, who I am, my qualifications, credentials, and my intention of the use of the platform. And I would say ever since then, I mean I still get banned from time to time, but it's so much less. I would say like maybe every 10 videos there's going to be one that gets deleted. So it's really perseverance and a lot of just work ethic. A lot of people ask me, how do you do it? I honestly just say time management and work ethic. Like I have a lot of times for teaching, a lot of times for research, a lot of time to make content. And, you know, with the right scheduling system, like I make it happen. But with the growth on TikTok, it makes me feel it's very rewarding because like then more people get to experience sex positivity, and if I can change like 10% of people's minds from sex negative to sex positive, I am happy.
Very well said. And it's just interesting, you know, for you, you're like perseverance, you know that you have to go through it. But to me, I'm like, it's crazy that someone like you, who is literally creating educational content, you know, okay, every few videos, I'm going to get banned. Every few videos, they're going to get deleted. And it's just how it is. But it's like, it shouldn't be that way. You know what I mean? Like,
It shouldn't.
it's insane to me that you're not putting out explicit content, it's educational, and yet for some reason you're still fighting this battle, but you are, it sounds like, surrendered in the battle, which is why you're moving along and you're just allowing it to be as it is. But
Yeah.
that's something that I was curious about, because that's one thing that I hear from almost every single expert I interview, is that they can't even use the word sex on their platforms. They have to use the word segs.
Yeah,
I think that,
SEGS.
yeah, I think that's what Justin LeMailer told me. He's like, I have to use it segs. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I'm not sure because I've been using SEX and it works on mine. And I think, I don't know, like you never know if you're shadow banned or not. But
yes.
at the end of the day, the ability, like the fact that I was able to grow my community to 1.7 million, I do have to give some props to TikTok for, you know, even though they have like such strict community guidelines, they see the content and it's like the majority of my content has no, like, it's not like nudity, right? Because their community guidelines is like no nudity, no like suggesting people do certain things. I'm literally just giving information. People can do whatever they want.
Incredible.
Yeah, I'm not saying like you guys go do this right now or you will die. Like, right?
Right.
I'm just like, hey, here are three things that happens, or like here are three ways to orgasm, or you know. So to me, it's so like just it's just mindfulness in teaching sex education. But I feel for all my sex educator content creators because we all experience the same type of like censorship on every platform, like Instagram, you know, Facebook, same thing. And a lot of brands, sexual wellness brands that make really good products aren't able to do any ads and
Wow.
expose their service to or service or products to more people because a lot of these platforms don't allow sex products ads.
Wow. Wow. So it sounds like these products are probably looking for a place where they can get their
It's
exposure.
tough. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough. So kudos to, you know, all the products and services that help with sexual wellness and that the type of censorship they have to experience.
Wow. My final question to you is, How do we create a more sex positive society?
Creating a sex positive society comes with the ability to talk about sex.
Mm,
I talk about this all the time. Sexual liberation is not about having a bunch of sex. It's about the ability to talk about sex in a positive, healthy, non-judgmental way. And the only way to move forward as a sex positive society is that we can all talk about sex. Trust me, like the other things will come. You know, the understanding each other's desires, exploring kinks, things like that that are more advanced, they will come when we start talking about sex more. We can't like jump to let's try this type of fetish when we like can't even talk about basic sex stuff.
yeah.
You know, you need to walk before you run. So sexual communication is key to a sex positive society.
Thank you so much. I
You're
really enjoyed
welcome.
this.
You're a really good host.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
I've been
you.
on like over 50 podcasts and I can tell that you're like top 1%. Yeah.
That makes me
People
really
are not good at asking questions. No naming names, but yeah, it's a very fruitful interaction here. I like it.
Oh, thank you so much. That
Yeah.
makes me feel incredible. I appreciate
Yeah, you
that.
should know.
Thank you.
This is amazing. And to, like I said, you know, to have a sex positive society, you have to talk about sex. And this is talking about sex in the best way possible. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.